Hello family. Welcome to Morales Stories, your home for gripping African tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Now sit back and enjoy the drama. Zara Mensah didn't believe in love. She believed in profit margins, stock portfolios, and pristine isolation. The words echoed inside the grand dining hall long after the guests had departed. Crystal chandeliers bathed the mahogany table in a cold, unflinching light. Silk drapes, patterned with the family crest, hung stiffly against the windows, unwilling to soften their posture. At the head of the table sat Zara Mensah, heiress to Ghana's most iconic fashion empire, her slender fingers drumming a precise, measured rhythm on the tabletop. Across from her, the polished silver service lay untouched, the last vestige of a dinner meant to placate her aging grandmother, Madame Efua. But Zara had barely skimmed a single bite of the spiced lamb. Her mind occupied by quarterly reports, new market entries, and a merger rumor that might, just might, double their revenue by year's end. Love was the final distraction. Madame Efua, 82 and still sharp as a tailor's needle, cleared her throat, a soft but unmistakable signal. "Zara," she said, voice steady though lined with years, "you've always valued ambition. But you forget something essential. Even the strongest armor must yield to the warmth of another heart." Zara offered a polite nod, her lips curling into the faintest of smiles that never quite reached her eyes. "Grandma, you know how important it is that I maintain focus? Our investors expect results." "Investors, yes," Madame Efua replied, placing a frail hand atop Zara's. The gesture was brief but potent, as though charging the air between them. "But what about expectations of the soul?" Zara's jaw tensed. She shifted her gaze to the portrait of her late grandfather, a stern man in a crisp suit, arms crossed defiantly. Under his watchful portrait, no sign of softness could remain. "I'm fine," she said, withdrawing her hand. "I have everything I need." Madame Efua's eyes glimmered with both pride and sorrow. "You have everything you can buy. But you have forgotten what you cannot." A soft click interrupted the tension. The ornate double doors swung open to admit Kojo Agyeman, tall, composed, face carved with quiet dignity. As the estate's driver, he moved with unobtrusive grace, greeting Madame Efua with a low bow and handing the tray of petits fours to a butler waiting in the hallway. His dark eyes flicked to Zara, and for a fraction of a second, she felt a ripple of something unfamiliar. Curiosity. He was always polite, always silent, always separate. Zara had known Kojo since childhood, when he first joined the household staff as a teenager. He'd risen through the ranks, earned a reputation for loyalty, discretion, and impeccable discretion. But over the years, he had become another fixture of the estate's finely polished world, respected yet invisible. That night, Zara rose from her seat. The last of the guests had gone home hours ago, leaving an echoing emptiness in the marble corridors. Staff moved silently, extinguishing candles in crystal sconces. As Zara ascended the broad staircase, her footsteps rang out like beating drums. She paused halfway, turning to glance back. In the soft glow, her grandmother and Kojo stood talking in hushed tones. Madame Efua's hand rested on his shoulder. Kojo inclined his head respectfully. Zara's chest tightened. She'd been summoned here to receive, what? Another lecture on tempering ambition with emotion? She straightened her shoulders and continued upstairs. But as she reached her suite, the lights flickered and died. The ornate lanterns at the hallway's end guttered, and darkness swallowed the corridor. Zara paused, startled. The generators should have kicked in immediately. She tapped her sleek phone, no signal. The hush that followed crackled with unease. She hurried to the door of her suite and turned the handle. But, strange. She tried again, locked. Her heart thudded. She rattled the knob. But steps sounded behind her. She whirled. There stood Kojo, calm and composed, lantern in hand, face softly illuminated. His presence filled the narrow corridor in a way that made Zara pause. What is going on?" she demanded, fingers brushing the cool brass of the knob. He held out an envelope. "Your grandmother asked me to deliver this to you," he said, voice low and steady. She snatched the envelope, glancing back at him in anger. "Why are you locking me in?" Kojo folded his hands behind his back. "I did not lock your door. Maintenance performed that." He spoke as though reciting a fact, not denying suspicion. Zara's pulse pounded. Inside the envelope lay a single sheet of paper, handwritten in familiar, spidery script. "You've built walls. I've built this weekend. You'll thank me later. Efua." A chill slid down Zara's spine. She looked at the closed doors at either end of the hall, doors she knew led only to the outside world. Now they offered no escape. She turned back to Kojo, voice tight. "You're in on this." He inclined his head. "Your grandmother has her reasons." His calm infuriated her. "Madame Efua is risking my reputation. If anyone finds—" A distant rumble of thunder cut her off. The storm, which had been brewing all evening, finally broke. Rain pelted the windows like a drumbeat. Lightning flashed, illuminating Kojo's face. Patient, unreadable. Zara's frustration snapped. She marched toward him, lantern swinging wildly. "Open the door." Kojo did not move. "Please," he said softly. "Join me for dinner." "You can't be serious." "And if I am?" Her chest heaved. She was furious, humiliated, terrified, and undeniably curious. Why had her grandmother orchestrated this? What did she hope to teach her? And why had she chosen Kojo, her driver, to carry out the plan? Lightning lit the hallway one more time. In that flash, Zara saw not the humble driver but the steady hand guiding her toward something unknown. The wind howled. Her breath caught. "Dinner?" she repeated, raising her chin. Her voice was brittle, but something in Kojo's calm invitation drew her forward. He stepped aside. The ornate double doors at the end of the corridor stood open, revealing the estate's formal dining room, set for two. A single candle flickered on the table. Silverware gleamed. A pot of steaming stew sat on a low trolley. Zara stared, torn between rage and fascination. She closed the distance to the table, each footstep echoing in the deserted hall. Once at the table, she set the envelope down. "This better be worth it," she said, voice low. Kojo offered her a chair. She sat, the leather seat uncomfortable against her tailored trousers. He ladled rich, aromatic stew into two bowls and placed one before her. The scent was earthy: beef, yams, tomatoes, chili. Comfort food, not something she'd expected tonight. Zara sniffed, then pushed the bowl away. "I don't eat at odd hours." He sat opposite her, stirring his own bowl gently. "It's late. And you're wasting your time." She folded her arms. "What do you want?" He paused, then met her gaze. "To show you who I am." "Why?" "Because your grandmother believes you've forgotten." He took a spoonful of stew. "She believes that beneath the heiress, there's still a woman." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. A woman with no time for frivolities. She stood, brushing off her coat. "This is absurd." The storm raged outside, thunder rolling like drums heralding some dire proclamation. Zara walked to the window, pressing her palm to the cool glass. Rain beaded on the pane. She turned. Kojo remained seated, calm. "I have a meeting at dawn." She began to back away. "Tomorrow I'll drive you there," he said, indifferent. She froze. "You what?" "In the morning." His eyes never flickered. Zara's breath caught. "Du." He set his spoon down. "Will you stay?" Silence crackled between them. She measured his steady gaze, the faint flicker of candlelight in his eyes. The hall behind her was dark, empty, except for the distant echo of rain. For the first time, Zara considered the possibility that this weekend held something more than an uncomfortable lesson. Her grandmother always said love demanded courage. She had locked Zara in here to force her to face something. She slid back into her chair. The leather creaked. Kojo picked up his spoon. He offered her a bowl. Zara closed her eyes, inhaled the vapor rising from the stew, and realized she was starving. As she lifted the spoon to her lips, thunder rattled the windows once more. Outside, lightning revealed the courtyard drenched, pond rippling under the rain. Inside, Two unexpected companions sat in the quiet glow of a single candle. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, Zara Mensah felt something stir behind the walls she had so carefully built. Intrigue, and perhaps, just perhaps, the faintest spark of warmth. Zara thought it was a power outage, until she realized the doors weren't just jammed. They were locked from the outside. Zara stormed through the corridor, panic and fury warping every step. The soft hum of generators, her usual safety net, had fallen silent. In the eerie quiet, her own breathing sounded reckless. She rattled the door handle again. But she slapped it with the heel of her palm. Still locked. Her phone screen glowed with a dead battery icon. No bars, no charge. She tapped desperately. Nothing. She yelled, "Kojo!" Her voice echoed off marble walls, but only rain answered. Frustration propelled her toward the nearest window. It revealed nothing but darkness and sheets of rain beating against glass. No way out. She pressed her forehead against the cool pane, hoping the storm would miraculously part. It did not. She whirled back to the hall. A flash of lightning illuminated a solitary figure at the far end, Kojo. His lantern cast a long shadow. Calm as always, he inclined his head. "What have you done?" Zara demanded. Her words trembled between accusation and fear. "Why am I locked in?" Kojo stepped closer. He held a small tray with 2 cups of steaming tea. "Your grandmother asked me to stay." His tone was matter-of-fact, devoid of explanation. "You're the only one left in this house," she said. She took the tray and dumped both cups onto the floor. The hot liquid sizzled as it met marble. "I don't need tea. I need answers." He knelt to retrieve the broken china. Zara had never seen him perform a menial task with such quiet dignity. The way he treated broken fragments with care unsettled her, revealing a compassion she'd overlooked. She realized how little she truly knew about the man in uniform. "I understand you're upset." He rose, wiping tea from his trousers. "But you'll thank her later." "I will thank her for what?" "Imprisonment." She advanced, chest heaving. "This is absurd." His calm gaze never wavered. "Grandma believes you've built walls around yourself. She wants you to see what life is like on the other side." "Life?" Zara scoffed, voice sharp. "This is life. My life." She glared at him. "You drive me to offices, drop me at events, and vanish into the background. You know nothing of my world." Kojo's expression softened. "Perhaps the reverse is true." She snorted. "Don't play riddles." She turned sharply, striding toward another door, hoping it would yield. It did not. Rain rattled above. She sank against the door, sliding to the floor. Exhaustion and adrenaline tangled inside her. Tears stung her eyes, tears she refused to shed. She pressed her back against cold wood and saw Kojo at the other end of the hall. He extended a hand. "Sit by the fireplace. Warm up." She wiped her cheek, then spat, "Don't treat me like a child." He retrieved a lantern from a sconce and lit the fireplace. After, he motioned to an armchair. Reluctantly, Zara moved, the leather creaking under her weight. He brought a wool blanket and draped it over her shoulders. She glared but did not remove it. Silence stretched. The storm's fury pressed against windows, like a wild beast desperate to enter. At last she spoke. "Tell me why." Kojo settled in across the hearth, hands clasped. He studied her for a long moment. "Because," he began, voice steady, "your grandmother believes that sometimes the greatest lessons cannot be taught in boardrooms or board meetings." "Then why involve me with you?" she asked. "What could you possibly teach me?" He looked down at his hands. "I once had a dream." She leaned forward. He continued, "It was to build something of my own, to design, to create. But circumstances." He paused, eyes lifting to hers. "Circumstances crushed that dream." Zara frowned. She studied his refined features, the small scar across his wrist. She had never noticed it before. "What circumstances?" Kojo dropped his gaze. "That is for another time." He rose and retrieved a small notebook from his pocket. "Your grandmother sent this to you." He handed it to her. It was embossed with the family crest. Zara opened it. On the first page, sketches of a dress, elegant, modern, echoing her own fashion line. Ink smudges and handwritten notes covered margins. She blinked. These are mine. He nodded. The originals. You redesigned them for the upcoming collection. Her breath caught. You stole them? He shook his head. No. I saved them from being discarded. She felt her heart judder. Why? He stepped closer, voice soft. Because creativity deserves respect. Zara closed the notebook. Heat rose to her cheeks. Silence returned, carrying a new weight. Hours passed as the storm raged. At some point, Zara drifted into half-sleep, curled in the chair. Kojo watched over her like a guardian. He whispered once, "Rest." Tiredness unraveled her defenses. She slept. Lightning jarred her awake. She sat bolt upright, breathing hard. The hall was empty. Kojo was gone. Only the fire crackled. Fear returned. She stumbled from the chair. The notebook lay on the floor. She scooped it up and ran to the doors. They remained locked. Panic threatened again. She spun to see Kojo emerging from the shadows, carrying 2 steaming mugs. You slept for hours, he said quietly. She stared at him, disoriented. How long? Since dinner. His lips curved faintly. Time moves differently here. She wrapped her arms around herself. This is madness. He offered her a mug. Just breathe. Zara closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the mug seep through her fingers. She tasted the tea, subtle notes of ginger and honey, and realized how long it had been since she'd savored anything so simple. For a moment, the angst inside her softened, replaced by a strange, unsettling curiosity. She steadied her breath, curiosity aflame. When she opened her eyes, he was gone again. She walked the hall, trying each door. None budged. Exhausted, she sank to the marble floor, back against the wall. Rain dripped through a crack in the ceiling, pattering at her feet. Kojo appeared, a wrench in hand. Without a word, he knelt and adjusted piping above. Water redirected. He crawled out from beneath a low ledge, wiping sweat from his brow. Zara watched him, struck by the fluid precision of his movements. She had always known him as a driver, never imagined he possessed the hands of a craftsman. A sudden respect bloomed, alongside a flicker of regret for her earlier anger. He rose and dusted his trousers. At that moment, she saw a small insignia on his wrench, a tailoring brand logo that matched a metal clasp on the notebook's cover. She whispered, "You were a tailor." He nodded, expression sober. "Tried. But I needed someone to believe." She swallowed hard. Memories of her grandmother's stories flickered in her mind, of kindness, of second chances. Her chest tightened. She finally understood that she had judged him by his uniform. He extended a hand to help her up. She accepted it, rising on unsteady legs. He pointed to the notebook. "Read it." She opened and scanned sketches, designs she had thought lost. Handwritten notes in margins, memories of early drafts. Her voice trembled. "Why show me this?" He looked at her, earnest. "Because you created beauty. I wanted you to remember why you started." She closed the book, clutching it to her chest. The storm began to subside. Rain softened to a murmur. A distant click sounded. She froze. Kojo's head turned toward the far door. At the same time, she noticed the lock had released. He inhaled sharply. "They're letting you out." Her pulse thundered in her ears. Each beat seemed to echo the words, "Letting you out." For the first time, Zara felt both trapped and free, as though the lock had released more than just a door. Lightning flickered one last time, illuminating the corridor in stark contrast, half in shadow, half in light. She took a hesitant step forward, adrenaline and doubt warring in her chest. Every nerve screamed to flee back to safety, yet another voice whispered to stay, to learn more. The hallway stood between two worlds, the freedom she knew and the unexpected lessons unfolding beside the man she never really saw. And Zara Mensah realized the night was far from over. The silence was no longer empty. It was thick. almost warm. Zara Mensah stepped out into the courtyard, lantern in hand, because Kojo Agyeman had insisted she breathe fresh air. The torrential rain hammered the slate tiles, sending rivulets of water pooling at her feet. Above, iron lanterns swayed in the gusting wind, their light dancing across the courtyard's wrought iron chairs. In the hush between thunderclaps, her own heartbeat sounded foreign, too loud, a drum announcing her vulnerability. Kojo followed, silent as a shadow. He paused beside a stone planter where broken branches lay scattered. Kneeling, he reached into the wet foliage and carefully lifted a small shape wrapped in downy feathers. Jazz-gray eyes, half-closed, stared up at him. A bird, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. "Come here," Kojo murmured, voice gentle. He cradled the trembling creature against his coat. Zara watched, fascinated despite herself. The contrast between his uniform's crisp lines and the soft, fragile life in his hands struck her like a revelation. All her preconceptions, of driver, of subordinate, crumbled in that moment. He glanced at her. "Help me." Reluctantly, Zara knelt beside him. Thunder rolled low, rattling the lantern above. She tore a scrap of her silk scarf and, with trembling fingers, wrapped the bird's injured wing. Kojo's eyes never left hers as she worked, patient, encouraging. "No rush. No judgment. It'll be okay," she whispered, more to herself than to the creature. Her voice cracked. She blamed the cold. Or perhaps the rawness of caring for something so small. Kojo rose and held out his hand, helping her to her feet. In the flicker of lantern light, she saw concern reflected in his dark eyes, an emotion she had seldom glimpsed in anyone who served her. He drew the bird close to his chest, as though shielding it from the world's cruelties. "I know a place," he said softly. He led her through a narrow gate into a walled garden where a stone bench waited beneath an awning of bougainvillea branches. The lantern's glow revealed paths strewn with petals and puddles. Rain dripped from leaves, each drop echoing like a metronome. They sat. Kojo gently laid the bird on his lap and produced a small vial of clean water. With a dropper, he moistened the creature's beak. "Thank you," she said, voice barely above the storm. He smiled, just a hint. "No one deserves to suffer alone." Zara traced the rim of her lantern with a finger. "I've never seen you like this." He looked at her, expression open. "Seen me how?" She hesitated. "Not just as someone who drives me around. I assumed you had no story of your own." He sighed, turning his gaze to the injured bird. "I grew up in Jamestown." He paused, as though measuring the weight of each syllable. "My mother taught me to sew before I could write my name. She dreamed I'd become a tailor like my father. I spent childhood afternoons at a little shop by the shore, watching him cut cloth, dreaming of running my own atelier." Zara's chest tightened. She pictured her own mother teaching her to walk in stilettos, not stitches. "What happened?" His jaw clenched. "Illness took her when I was 12. My father, he couldn't cope with grief. He sold everything, left me with an aunt who saw me as burden. I worked odd jobs, porter, gardener, anything to survive." He glanced at her, eyes steady. "Until your grandmother offered me work here." Zara swallowed. "You left your dream behind." He shook his head. "I shelved it, but never forgot. Every fabric I delivered, every stitch I pressed for your empire reminded me of what I lost." The rain intensified, drumming on the metal roof overhead. The bird shivered. Kojo wrapped it in a piece of stray cloth. "Your grandmother rescued more than me. She believed I could still find a way." Zara's throat tightened with emotion she had spent years denying. "Why didn't you fight?" He met her gaze. "I did in my heart. But survival often silences ambition, until someone shows you it's worth pursuing again." Her breath hitched. She thought of the boardroom battles she waged daily, lawsuits, hostile takeovers, profit forecasts. And here was a man, servant of her family, carrying the weight of his own loss with grace. Silence fell between them, not cold this time, but alive with understanding. The bird stirred in his lap. Its tiny head shook. Kojo coaxed it gently. "Easy, easy." Zara watched, transfixed. Compassion swelled inside her chest, cracking the framework of her defenses. She realized that all her life, she had built walls to protect herself from pain and from connection. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for judging you." He offered a small, kind smile. No apology needed. His gaze drifted back to the bird. "We all carry judgments. Yours just happened to hide in high places." She nodded, wiping a stray tear. "I never asked about your past." He tucked a stray feather behind the creature's wing. "You asked now." They tended the bird until its breathing eased. The storm began to wane, the thunder moving off like a departing guest. Lantern light flickered as the wind calmed. At last, the injured creature fluttered its wings weakly and peered up at them with bright, alert eyes. Kojo lifted it in cupped hands and set it gently on the stone bench. It hopped once, twice, then flew up to a low branch, perching there as though testing its strength. Zara exhaled, relief blooming. "It's going to be okay." Kojo nodded, voice soft. "Just like us." She closed her eyes, feeling that warmth, something soft and insistent, spark behind her ribs. Her grandmother's plan was working, though Zara admitted it only to herself. A sudden crack echoed as a branch outside snapped under the storm's final gust. The lantern flickered and died. Darkness closed in. She yelped. Kojo sprang to his feet, hands moving swiftly to relight the lantern. Sparks danced, and the flames sputtered to life, casting their shadows on the whitewashed wall. Zara's pulse raced. The darkness had reminded her how easily one could lose sight of a guiding light. He handed her the lantern. "Come inside," he said. "It's warmer by the fire." She hesitated, glancing at the bird, now steadfast on its perch, and then stood. Together, they walked back through the gate into the great hall, where a crackling hearth waited. The scent of burning mahogany filled the air. Kojo placed the lantern on a side table and retrieved 2 stools. He positioned them so they faced the fire. Zara sank onto one, heart still thundering. He sat opposite, and for a long moment, neither spoke. The fire popped, wood splitting like whispered secrets. Outside, the final drizzle fell in soft sheets. Then Zara found her voice. "Why do you work for us?" Kojo looked at her, embers dancing in his eyes. "Because your grandmother believes in stories and second chances." His answer hung between them, a challenge and an invitation. Zara drew in a slow breath, feeling the charged silence shift into something richer, hope. Music changed everything, even when played from an old phone and tiny speaker. By the time Zara had found her way back into the mansion's grand drawing room, the storm had lost much of its fury. The rain pattered softly against the stained glass windows. The marble floor, still slick underfoot, reflected the golden glow of oil lamps. Kojo moved with quiet purpose, lifting a dusty wooden box from beneath a sideboard. Zara watched with a mixture of curiosity and wariness as he opened it. Inside lay an assortment of objects, a faded photograph, a tarnished pocket watch, and at the bottom, a battered transistor radio and 2 old batteries. He turned to her with a small smile. "I kept this here in case we needed music." "This works?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Kojo nodded. "I tested it earlier. If the batteries still hold a charge, the broadcast might come through." Zara crouched beside him. He inserted the batteries and tuned the dial. For a moment, there was only static. Then, faint and crackling, a melody emerged, the lively, rhythmic strains of high-life music. The scratchy tune grew clearer, carrying voices and guitars in a joyous dance. Zara felt a sudden thrill. Music, simple, unfiltered, had the power to break through walls stronger than any steel door. Kojo found an old phone connected to a tiny speaker. With a few deft touches, he paired it to the radio's auxiliary jack. A second source of melody blended smoothly. He patted the plush armchair. "May I have this dance?" Zara stared. "Dance?" She opened her mouth to refuse, but the warmth of the music filled her chest. She remembered childhood gatherings under warm porches, lanterns swinging in summer breezes. The memories felt frayed at the edges, but achingly real. She stood, smoothing her tailored blouse. I don't dance. His smile was patient. Then let me guide you. He extended a gloved hand. Zara hesitated, then placed her palm in his. His grip was firm, reassuring. He pulled her gently into the center of the room. The first steps were awkward. Zara's heels slipped on marble. Kojo adjusted his stance, turning her so they faced each other. His other hand rested lightly on her waist. Her breath caught at his scent, wood and spice, and at the proximity of his body. The high life beat quickened. Zara glanced at the ancestral portrait above the mantel, looming over the room, and then back at Kojo. He moved with surprising elegance, guiding her hips to the rhythm. She followed, at first stiff, then more fluidly as the music wove its magic. Each note dissolved a fragment of her reserve. Laughing, Zara let her head tilt back. The chandelier lights danced across her hair like fireflies. Kojo's face lit with delight. They spun, arms entwined, until the room blurred. They stopped. Zara's cheeks burned. She pressed a hand to her heart, feeling it race more rapidly than in any boardroom. A flash of lightning punctuated the windowsill, followed by distant thunder. The rain had almost ceased. Kojo cleared his throat. You're a quick learner. She raised an eyebrow. You could say I'm motivated. They collapsed onto the sofa, breathing heavily. The radio crackled, switching songs. A soulful singer crooned about lost love and new beginnings. The irony was not lost on Zara. Kojo reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his handkerchief. He dabbed sweat from his brow, then looked at her seriously. There's something I need to tell you. Zara's pulse thundered in her ears. She nodded. He took a deep breath. Before I joined your grandmother, I had my own tailoring brand. I called it Adamma Atelier. I started small, sewing suits and dresses for neighbors in Jamestown. Word spread. I launched a website, secured a small showroom, and hired an assistant. I was happy, sir. Truly happy. Zara closed her eyes, imagining him at a sewing machine, vibrant fabric draped around him, charting his own destiny. She pictured her own company's acquisition offers, hostile takeovers that swallowed local brands whole. Kojo's voice softened. Then your company offered to buy me out. They framed it as a partnership. I thought it was an opportunity. But after signing, I lost control. Your team changed the designs, the pricing, and phased out my artisans. I watched my dream unravel, piece by piece, while you slept under the comfort of your empire. Silence crashed between them, heavier than any storm. Zara's mind reeled. She had known corporate acquisitions could devastate livelihoods but had never questioned the process when decisions enhanced her bottom line. She had viewed it as a necessary path to growth, not as a wound inflicted on aspiring craftsmen. Tears stung her eyes. I didn't know. Kojo shook his head. You didn't ask to know. Every acquisition was signed off by you, by boards you chaired, by reports you reviewed. I respected the process. I respected you. I didn't want to feel bitter. Zara's hand drifted to her chest, as though holding her heart in place. Why didn't you speak up? His gaze held hers. I thought you'd never listen. She drew in a shuddering breath. I should have known. I should have paid attention to the stories behind each brand. Kojo leaned closer. Stories matter, Zara. Numbers tell one story. People tell another. Her vision blurred with new understanding and shame. She remembered the injured bird, Kojo's past, the forced isolation of the mansion. Her grandmother's lesson was unfolding piece by piece. Lightning flashed. In that stark moment, Zara saw her life reflected in the radio's dim glow, structures built on ambition, walls erected against vulnerability. She realized how thoroughly she had compartmentalized her world. Lightning flashed. In that stark moment, Zara saw her life reflected in the radio's dim glow, structures built on ambition, walls erected against vulnerability. She realized how thoroughly she had compartmentalized her world. Kojo rose beside her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You have powers, Zara. Use it to rebuild hopes beyond numbers. Her breath caught. The walls she had built around ambition and isolation crumbled. She looked at him, eyes shining. I want to make amends. His smile was the first genuine one she had seen on his face. "Then let's start now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, small, elegant, the logo of Adamma Atelier hand-inked in calligraphy. "Reopen the atelier," he said softly. "Partner with me." Her heart thundered. She took the card, pressing it in her palm. "I will." They stood together by the radio and the speaker, bodies close, minds united by a shared vision. The music swelled, filling the room with hope. The warmth from the fire enveloped them like a promise. In that magical moment, the mansion transformed from a gilded prison into a home where possibilities danced on the air. And Zara Mensah realized that sometimes, the greatest victories come not from financial conquests, but from acts of compassion and partnership born in a single fiery dance. Zara woke up to the smell of tea. But it wasn't the tea that shook her. It was the empty couch. She blinked against the early morning light that filtered through stained glass windows, painting fractured patterns across the marble floor. The armchair by the hearth, where she had fallen into a fitful sleep, was now unoccupied. In its place stood a delicate porcelain cup on a silver tray, steam rising in lazy spirals. Her heart jolted. She scrambled to her feet, brushing wisps of hair from her face. "Kojo!" Her voice cracked in the cavernous drawing room. No answer. Zara swept aside the thick velvet drapes and peered down the length of the corridor. Tiles glistened under the soft glow of lanterns, untouched since last night. Footsteps echoed as she raced to the window beside the front doors. Beyond the glass, the world was still, dew-damp grass trembling in the breeze. The gates she'd been locked behind only hours ago now stood wide open, as if inviting her escape. Panic swelled, then dissolved into determination. She seized her phone from the mantel, still dead. Charging cables lay discarded on the floor where she'd hurled them in frustration. Zara yanked on her tailored coat and swept through the hallway, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm. Each locked door she passed now hung ajar, as though the estate itself had granted her freedom. At the foot of the grand staircase, she hesitated only a moment before descending 2 steps at a time. Her grandmother's suite lay beyond an archway draped in ivory silk. Zara knocked, breath ragged. "Grandma Kojo." The door swung open. Madame Efua stood in a flowing caftan of indigo and gold, porcelain cup in hand, sipping hibiscus spiced tea. Her expression was calm, impossibly serene. "Good morning, my dear." Zara's chest heaved. "Where is he?" "Kojo, was he here last night?" Madame Efua set her cup on a carved ebony table. "He left at dawn." Her tone was gentle, almost amused. "Said he had served his time." "Served his time?" Zara echoed, fury and relief warring inside her. I needed him." Her grandmother smiled, eyes twinkling. "You discovered walls you never knew you'd built. Now it's your turn to knock them down." She paused, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind Zara's ear. "He believed in you. I believe in both of you." Zara groped for words, but none came. Her grandmother's faith felt like a warm current beneath the cold marble. She turned abruptly and fled the suite, the corridor swallowing her haste. Downstairs, the estate's staff moved like ghosts, illumi 2 arms of presence and absence. No one spoke, no one questioned her passage. At the front doors, a lone butler bowed. "Madame's orders, the gate is yours," he said quietly. He stepped aside. Zara crossed the threshold into the crisp dawn air. Outside, an ivory Range Rover waited. The door unlocked at her approach. Inside, the seats still bore the faint scent of oil lamps and evening stew. She slid into the driver's seat, hand trembling. As she drove away from the mansion, she passed ancient mango trees dripping with dew, their heavy branches brushing the window like gentle hands. The roads of Accra greeted her in soft light, vendors arranging plantain fritters under blue tarps, TRO tross clattering past, and early morning joggers weaving through traffic at the Kwame Nkrumah interchange. Traffic lights blinked yellow at OSU, and the aroma of fresh kenki and pepper sauce drifted from roadside stalls. Her pulse steadied. She inhaled deeply. Today, she would chase more than an apology. She would pursue a partnership born in fire and rain. At the community center in Nima, a sign proclaimed, "FUA Foundation, Sewing Futures." Zara parked beside rust-spotted motorbikes and strode toward a low-slung building adorned with bright murals of fabrics swirling in the wind. Inside, the hum of sewing machines filled the air, metal presser feet stamping rhythm like distant drums. Children bent over looms, fingers dancing across cloth. Volunteers guided them, laughter punctuating the steady thrum. Light filtered through latticed windows, painting patterns on colorful scraps strewn across work tables. Zara paused at the threshold. A young woman in Ankara print, a former student of FUA's foundation, greeted her with a warm smile. "Madam Mensah, we're so grateful you came." Zara's throat tightened. "Is Kojo here?" The woman nodded toward a corner where Kojo knelt beside a wooden bench, demonstrating hand-stitching techniques to a cluster of curious children. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms marked by needle pricks, testaments to his craft. He looked up, surprised, then stood. Children squealed with delight, rushing to greet him. He smiled broadly, patience and pride mingling in his gaze. Zara walked toward him, every step retracing the echoes of last night's revelations. "Kojo," she began, voice soft. "He's reached a table laden with embroidered swatches." He turned, expression unreadable. "I'm sorry I chased you away," she said, fumbling for the right words. He held up a hand. "No need." He motioned for her to join him. She sat on a low stool beside him. His proximity felt different here. No barriers of status, no servant and mistress pretense, just two people united by shared purpose. Zara looked around at the eager faces. A boy named Kwame held up a jacket Kojo had helped him craft. "Look, Madam Mensah. Kojo taught me how to sew the collar." Zara's eyes misted. She reached out and tousled his hair. "It's beautiful." Kojo smiled, then turned back to Zara. "I wasn't sure you would come." She reached for his hand. "I had to. You taught me more about leadership than any boardroom ever could." Her voice trembled. "Let's build something real." He lifted her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "We already started." Zara inhaled the mingled scents of cotton, sweat, and hope. She rose and addressed the children. "Who wants to visit the atelier?" Hands shot up, cheers echoed, and Zara laughed, pell-mell, genuine. She turned to Kojo. "Let's show them how." Together, they guided the children outside to a makeshift runway, scraps of fabric pinned to a clothesline, mannequins draped in vibrant prints. Zara lifted a microphone and announced, presenting the first collection of the Adamma Mensah House of Design. The children paraded along the runway, beaming with pride. Cameras flashed on volunteers' phones. Kojo beamed with father-like pride. Afterward, under a canopy of bougainvillea, Zara unveiled a banner, "Opening soon, Adamma Mensah Atelier, where stories are woven." She picked up a pair of scissors and cut the ribbon, Kojo at her side. The sound of fabric tearing open echoed like a promise. Later, as the sun climbed higher, Zara and Kojo sat on a stone bench in the garden, sharing suya-spiced beef skewers from a nearby stall. Sweat glistened on their brows. Between them lay plans, sketches, cost projections, and a vision to train young tailors. They spoke of workshops in Kumasi and Tamale, internships in the menswear division, scholarships for top students to attend fashion school in Paris. Their voices intertwined, ambition tempered by compassion. As her grandmother's foundation busied itself inside, Zara realized the estate's lessons, the locked doors, the storm, the dance, had broken more than her pride. They had dismantled her walls and opened her to a new definition of success. She looked at Kojo, whose eyes shone with equal parts gratitude and determination. He reached across and took her hand. "Thank you for believing." She squeezed his fingers. "Thank you for reminding me who I am." A schoolboy appeared, holding a freshly stitched pocket square. "Madam Mensah, for you." He pressed it into Zara's hand. The fabric bore a pattern of interlocking hearts. Zara recognized it as Kojo's original insignia. She turned to Kojo. "You designed this?" He nodded. A little reminder that every business begins with love. Zara pressed the square to her heart. The sun warmed her face. Morning traffic hummed in the distance. A new day had dawned, one where profit and passion walked hand in hand. And as the gates of the community center opened to welcome more eager learners, Zara Mensah realized that sometimes, the most important doors are the ones you choose to open. Love doesn't knock. It drives. And sometimes reckless. Zara gripped the steering wheel as the Range Rover sped down the George Walker Bush Highway, headlights slicing through dusk's deepening purple. Beside her, Kojo sat silent, watching the city blur past. Behind them lay the newly opened Adamma, Mensah atelier. Ahead lay his past. Zara's pulse pounded in her ears. This drive was more than a test of her new partnership. It was a journey into Kojo's world, a world she'd only glimpsed through borrowed sketches and second-hand stories. She risked everything by steering them toward Jamestown's old quarters, where narrow streets wove between clusters of pastel houses and children played football in alleyways. "Are you sure about this?" Kojo asked, breaking the hush. His voice was steady but soft, as though wary of disturbing memories. Zara glanced at him, determination bright in her eyes. "I wouldn't have asked if I wasn't." He exhaled, shoulders relaxing. "Thank you." They drove off the highway and into Accra's historic heart. Neon signs gave way to hand-painted storefronts. Tarmac yielded to cobblestones slick with evening mist. Zara slowed, navigating turns so tight she could almost touch both walls at once. The scent of grilled kelaweel drifted from a roadside stall, mingling with the tang of the sea. Kojo pointed through the windshield. There, behind the blue townhouse. Zara eased the Rover onto a narrow lane. There, half hidden by bougainvillea, stood a weathered building bearing a faded sign, Adamma Atelier. Paint peeled, shutters hung crooked, and broken glass crunched under the Rover's tires. The sight tugged at Zara's heart. She cut the engine. Kojo turned in his seat, voice thick with emotion. "I haven't been here in 10 years. Zara slid from the car and approached the entrance. He followed. She reached out, brushing her fingertips over the chipped letters. Dust lifted in motes, swirling like ghosts of aspirations past. "I dreamed of filling this place with laughter," Kojo whispered, stepping forward. "You tried the door?" "Not, of course." He sighed and produced a key gifted by Madame Efua the night she'd orchestrated their isolation. The lock clicked open. Inside, the atelier yawned before them, rows of empty work tables, rusted singer machines perched like relics, fabric scraps strewn across the floor. A single beam of streetlight slanted through a mangled shutter. The silence pressed in, heavy with both loss and potential. Zara stepped in, drawing in a slow breath. "It's perfect," she said, her tone equal parts awe and resolve. Kojo knelt to inspect a fallen sewing machine belt. "It's mine but broken. You saw what I can do. Will you help me fix it?" She slipped her arms around his waist from behind. "We'll fix everything." Together, they spent the night clearing debris by lantern light. Zara swept dusty floorboards, the fiber of her tailored gloves catching every thread. Kojo oiled machines. Zara watched his hands move with care and precision. At one point, he stopped and studied her, embers of gratitude shining in his eyes. They shared a quiet smile before returning to their tasks. By dawn, both were exhausted but triumphant. The floor gleamed, machines stood upright. A row of mannequins, gifted by Zara's contacts, lined one wall. She poured 2 cups of steaming ginger tea from a thermos and handed one to him. "To new beginnings," she toasted, voice thick. He clinked his cup against hers. "And to second chances." Their moment was interrupted by the distant honk of a taxi horn. Zara checked her phone, no signal. But she spotted a tiny slip of paper peeking from under a work table. It bore the landlord's name and a phone number. She dialed, voice professional. "Good morning, Madame Mensah here. I'm interested in leasing the Adamma Atelier long-term. Let's discuss terms." Kojo hovered, brow furrowed. "Does your company support this?" She scrolled through her digital files. "They will, once I make the case." She paused, steeling herself. "I'll need your help." He looked away, uncertainty flickering. "What if they say no?" Zara met his gaze. "Then we convince them." Half an hour later, Vendor lorries rumbled past as Zara stood beside the landlord, a shrewd man in a three-piece suit, negotiating a deposit. Kojo remained silent but supportive. After tense minutes punctuated by careful nods and counteroffers, the landlord signed a lease extension. Zara's cheeks flushed with triumph. She hugged Kojo, drawing laughter from his guarded lips. Back inside, they surveyed the space. Zara could almost hear the hum of fabric being cut, threads snipping under skilled fingers. She ran her palm along a polished tabletop. "We'll host classes," she said. "Hire local tailors. Showcase your designs." Kojo leaned close. "I want to mentor them, teach them craftsmanship and pride." She smiled. "And I'll handle marketing, financing, everything else." He reached for her hand. Their fingers wove together, and for the first time, the weight of their partnership settled into something warm and thrilling. "Thank you for believing in me," he murmured. Her chest tightened. "Thank you for reminding me why I fell in love with fashion, and with you." He turned, searching her face. "Zara?" She closed the distance, brushing her lips to his. The kiss was soft, hesitant, then deepened with years of longing and newfound hope. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. Outside, the sun broke over the horizon. Morning light spilled through cracks in the shuttered windows, illuminating motes of dust like tiny sparks of promise. They lingered in that glow, hands entwined, until a chorus of distant voices reached them, children from the FUA Foundation sewing program, heading to tour the atelier. Zara straightened her blouse, laughter bubbling in her throat. "They're our first guests." Kojo grinned. "Let's show them home." Together, they ushered in a group of wide-eyed children, guiding them past row upon row of ready machines. Zara explained the machines, Kojo demonstrated stitches. The children's cheers filled the space, irresistible and pure. An hour later, they stood outside the shop, watching the children dash into narrow streets, each clutching scraps they'd sewn. Kojo turned to Zara, eyes alight. "We did it." She wrapped her arm around his waist. "We did." They walked hand in hand back toward the car, past vendors setting up fresh tubes of kelaweel, past neighbors greeting Kojo with nods of respect. Accra was stirring to life around them, a city built on stories of resilience. Zara paused at the foot of the stoop, looking up at the atelier's sign now freshly painted in bold letters. She reflected on the weekend that had changed everything: the locked doors, the stolen sketches, the dance by firelight, the broken machines, and the road that led them here. Kojo squeezed her hand. "What's next?" She met his gaze, heart soaring. "Now we build." He nodded, face alight with shared purpose. Together, they turned toward the winding street, toward new challenges, brighter days, and a love born in lockdown but set free on an open road. Sometimes love isn't found at the top. It's waiting on a road less traveled. The end. Love the story? Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and become part of the Morales Stories family. Your support helps us bring more powerful African tales to life. Thanks for watching. We can't wait to share the next one with you. See you soon.